This video is part of the unit on scope and parameter passing. In this video, we'll define the term scope, be able to identify scope of a variable in a program, and we'll practice doing that with an example. And you'll understand why parameters and return values are necessary because of scope. Scope is the region of the program where a variable is defined. It's the part of the program where Java will recognize the variable's identifier as being valid because it's defined in that particular region of the program. And the variable scope always begins on the line where it's declared and continues until the next set of closing curly brackets for the block that it's a part of. So we're going to look at an example program. This particular example program includes a main method, and you can see that on the screen. Inside the main method, we have some variables declared, including an array and some other values. And then we also have a user-defined method called binary search that performs our binary search algorithm. Previously, we've looked at code where the binary search was included as part of the main. And in this particular example, we just have that same algorithm broken out into a separate method. So we're going to practice identifying the scope of various variables by looking at which line number particular variables are defined for. So my first question is, which line number is the variable array defined for in this program? And remember that it starts on the line where the variable is declared and then continues until the closing set of curly brackets that encloses it. So just scanning through this program in the main method, that's where my variable array is defined. You can see it starts on line 10. So the scope for array begins on line 10. And then it continues through the set of curly brackets where that particular line of code is included. So if you look up here, the curly brackets that begin that block of code is on line 6 where the main method is defined. And that means that my variable array is defined for the entirety of the main methods. It's until the main method closes. So the scope for the array variable ends on line 31. So the scope of array is lines 10 through 31 because it's defined on line 10 and then continues down through the closing set of curly brackets for that particular block of code. Let's look at another example. Which line numbers are the variable search value defined for? So let's go back up to our program. Let's scan for the search value. It could be something that's part of the main method. It could be something that's part of the search method. In this particular program, it looks like search value that's defined right here. It's my variable declaration on line 18. And let's think about what block of code this is defined for. So it begins up here with that same curly brackets. That means that it's defined through that same end of the block of code. It's also defined through line 31. So search value is line 18 through 31 in this particular program. Let's try one on your own. The next question asks you, which line numbers is the variable result defined for? So again, you want to scroll up to the program. You want to look for the variable result. And then the scope would be beginning on that line and then following through to the closing curly bracket where that line's included. So pause the video for a second, see if you can find the scope, and then unpause it and we'll look at it together. So the variable result, that's part of the, scanning for it. Oh, here it is. So it's defined on line 22, and that's inside this curly bracket right here that begins the while loop. That means the result variable is only defined in that while loop. The scope of the variable ends right here on line 28. Again, that's because the result is inside this while loop. That's the kind of most local curly bracket set, so it ends on line 28. I think there's one more example here. Yeah, which line numbers is the variable I defined for? So if we look in our program, it looks like variable I, it's defined right here at the beginning of the for loop, so that's line 11. And then it's declared as part of the initialization step for this for loop. And in Java, that means that this I value is only defined inside the scope of the for loop. The scope for it ends on line 14, where that while loop terminates. So we looked at a few examples. They were all part of the main method. But you can also find the scope for variables that are part of the search method. So for example, if I asked you what the scope for the variable middle is, well, that starts on line 36. And then that's included inside the declaration for this particular method. The closing curly bracket for that's line 53. So the scope for middle would be line 36 through 53. So let's think a little bit about the implications for scope. What does this mean in our program? What it means is that all the values in your program, all the variables aren't known to the whole entirety of the program. For example, in our main method above, main method might be thinking, I know about variables like array and the I value and search value and result, but I don't know how to calculate the search value. I don't know how to figure out whether that search value actually appears in the array. That's because if you look up at the main method, the algorithm for search isn't part of the main method. It has some variable declared. We know that it calls the search method, that's down here, but it doesn't actually have the algorithmic steps to perform that operation. So the main method knows about certain values. And the binary search method also knows about certain values. It knows that it needs to know the contents of the array where a value is stored, and it needs to know the key that it's supposed to be looking for, and it knows how, if you tell it those two values, how to figure out whether the key is part of the array. But it doesn't know anything about the variables that are part of the main method just on its own. The binary search method doesn't know anything about the value of array or search value. None of those are part of this particular method. And so the scope of the two methods are different. They're completely distinct from each other. There's these two boxes. They both have pieces of the algorithm that form our total solution to the problem, but they have to work together in order to actually accomplish that. So as you can see from the example, the main and the binary search methods on their own are just stuck. They can't, on their own, solve the particular problem that we're trying to solve, be able to tell whether a particular search key is inside our list. The main method knows about some of the data, but it doesn't know all the steps involved in doing the binary search algorithm. On the other hand, the binary search algorithm knows how to perform the steps, but doesn't know the specific data that we want to operate on. And so in order for these two parts to communicate with each other, we need to, in order for these two parts to work together, we need them to communicate with each other. We need them to share information. And that's the whole reason why we need arguments and parameter values in our methods, so that we're able to communicate information from the main program to a method so that it can perform its algorithm and send a value back to the main program.